To the Game Time podcast. We've got a very special guest on the pod here today. We've got the voice, the radio voice of the Indianapolis Colts. We've got Matt Taylor here on the Game Time podcast. Matt, it's great to have you on. Excited you can make it here today and join us here for this episode of the Game Time podcast.
I appreciate you guys. My pleasure. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, Matt, I want to give you the floor a little bit. Just kind of talk about your journey, not only as a broadcaster, but also, getting to the Colts and how it's been for you in that journey and that experience and what you've learned, being at this point in your career.
Well, I'll just give you the short story of it. I was very blessed at a young age to have a decent understanding of what it was that I wanted to do. I was always attracted to entertainment, and I was the kid that would mess around in my living room doing impersonations of people I saw on TV or heard on the radio, and then obviously as I got older and I was playing sports and becoming an athlete myself, I became more interested in the art form of play-by-play and becoming more attracted to that. And so went to college and just went full bore into getting as much experience in that as possible. And then post-college, had a variety of different jobs and worked for a couple of different entities trying to, fulfill the goal and the dream of, working in professional sports and doing play-by-play for a professional sports team. So I joined the Colts in 2012 and have been the voice of the Colts since 2018. I was first hired to manage the radio network and do all of the production work. And basically, for those that don't know, just basically do everything except call the game. And now I'm doing that as well. So I like to think, I say this all the time, like my fingerprints, my DNA is over everything that you hear coming out of your car speakers or your speakers at home when it comes to Colts games on the radio. So that's sort of been my journey, and it's been sort of a wild, fun ride and a lot of peaks and valleys within that, and there's no question about it. But wouldn't trade it for anything. I say it all the time. What I'm doing beats the heck out of working for a living, right? I get to marry my two favorite things, sports and specifically football and radio, and I get paid to do it. So life for me is pretty good, and I'm very, very blessed to be able to do this in the market that I grew up in, doing it for a team that I grew up following and covering before I started working for the Colts. So it's pretty special.
No, I love it. The one question I'll ask, and then I'll give it to my co-host Daryl. Especially for me, I've changed my preparation for when I get ready for a broadcast over the years in different ways. How I've done it, since I've gotten to college, I try to make some tweaks, year over year. Can you go through your preparation for an NFL game? From when one Sunday ends to the next Sunday, how does that prep look like for you?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question because I like to think that there's no one that's going to outwork me in terms of preparation. I think being a former athlete myself has trained me that preparation is key. If you're not watching film or you're not studying for your opponent, then you're not going to have a good chance at winning. And so that mindset has just never left me, and I've sort of carried that over into this aspect of what I'm doing professionally as it relates to sports. So, long story short, I'll have to know the teams inside and out, from on both sides of the ball, plus special teams. I'll have to know the individual players, especially the guys in the two deep. I'll have to know them inside and out. So my goal is to memorize as much as possible and to have as much organized and put into different categories, I should say, that makes sense for me. You talk about your system of preparation. I think that'll look probably a little bit different than mine. And I don't think I'm right or you're right. It's just what works for you. You know what I mean? Sometimes only you can read your own handwriting. And, some people look at the way I do things and it's like, what, this makes no sense. Well, it makes sense for me. And if you're the one calling the game, that's all that matters, right? It's just what makes sense for you, it's inside your head, so that you can find things when you need them. It's organized to a point where when something happens during the game, you can bring that to light, and you're not fumbling through notes or trying to find something on a computer. You know exactly where it is because you've done that research. So long story short, you have to know the teams inside and out, the players inside and out, and it's like studying for a final, right? It's like every Sunday, every week, the game itself is the final,
Yeah.
and you're taking a test. So if you're prepared and if you've studied, I'm not saying the game should be easy, but you should be able to navigate it, right? You shouldn't feel overwhelmed. And I've had those feelings. I've had those feelings calling a game. I've had those feelings being a student taking a test. You just sort of like develop that pit in your stomach where like, oh, this is not going to go well, right? There's things that are going to happen really fast that I'm not going to be able to identify, or that's just the worst feeling in the world. So you try like heck during the week to feel like you're prepared for the game, because you owe it to the audience, you owe it to the job, you owe it to the responsibility itself to do the best job you can. And it also just makes for a crisp broadcast. And if anybody touches the ball during the game, you should be able to, in a split second, know who that person is, and you should be able to, top of mind, be able to explain to the audience who that person is and why do they matter. Why do they matter that day? To educate the audience, entertain them, but also never sacrifice, the nuts and bolts of the game as it relates to, where the ball went, the upcoming down and distance, and things like that. So it's a little bit of a balance. And, the what I always say too, as it relates to prep, it's kind of a demoralizing feeling because you put all of this work into being prepared for the game, and I feel like that's what it takes to be ready for the game. But in reality, you only use about 5 to 10% of your prep. But
Yeah.
you don't know what that 5 to 10% is going to be. The game dictates the knowledge that you try to educate the audience with. But there's no better feeling researching things and sort of getting into the weeds and being prepared for just about everything. And then that one little thing comes to light and it comes to fruition, and you can really, drive home to the audience, why it matters. That's the payoff,
Yeah.
is when you can have something happen that's sort of nuanced, and then be able to bring it to light. Hey, this is why this matters, or this is why they struggle in this particular scenario, or this is why they flourish because of these things. You're really able to educate the audience and give them something that you think they're probably not going to get anywhere else,
Mhm.
based on the work that you did ahead of time before the game.
No, I love it. And I think one of the first things I got told when I got to IU East was, when we were talking about prep and being prepared for broadcast and stuff like that, you're like, if you're not having fun, then this may not be the area for you. So no, I agree with that 100%. I want to give it over to my co-host Daryl. He's got some questions for you. He listens to he's a bigger Pacer fan, but he does love the Colts as well. But
Love it.
he listens to Mark Boyle on the radio no matter what when the Pacers play. So he loves the radio. He definitely loves the radio more than TV. So he's got some questions for you as well.
And Matt, that's because if I'm watching the game, I understand the national broadcast and what they've got to do. I want to feel a part of what's going on, and national broadcasts don't do it for me from that perspective, which is why that's the case. So to segue to that, a couple of questions I've got. The first one I want to find out is a lot of radio types are have a signature. They got a signature statement. From you, touchdown, INDY. What is the genesis of that? Because I really like it, and that's going to segue me into my other question. But I like it. What brought you to that?
Well, first of all, I appreciate it, and I get asked this a lot, and I wish I had a better story, but I really don't. But it happened kind of organically. Like, I wasn't searching for anything like that. I don't think it's necessary for the broadcast per se, but it does sort of punctuate the moment when it's necessary, when it's warranted. And so I try to be cognizant of not using it too much, but also having it be part of, sort of like the weave it into the fabric of our broadcast, if you will. So I think there's a balance to that. But yeah, like the story goes, I like to do yard work, and which is kind of weird because most people don't enjoy yard work. But probably about 5, 6 years ago, I'm out in the yard, and when I'm out there, I like to just listen to music or listen to a podcast or something, just something to sort of like keep me going while I'm out in the yard where you're hot and sweaty this time of year doing stuff, right? So it was close to actually this time of year, and I was listening to a fantasy football podcast. Just wanted to hear what they had to say about the Colts. Really had no affinity for the podcast itself, but just something to have on, right? And this is back when Andrew Luck and the Colts were rolling, and they were talking about all the weapons the Colts had offensively and how good the Colts were going to be and prolific scoring and all of these things. And the guy sort of wrapped up his monologue on the Colts by saying, "Yeah, expect to see a lot of touchdowns this year at Indy." And like, I don't know why, but I sort of stopped in my tracks and said, "Well, that's got a nice little ring to it." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know if I necessarily like stole it per se, but I kind of tweaked it and made it my own. And so, like I said, like it's just like a fun little thing. And when the moment is right, you sort of know it when you see it or sense it. You bring it out, and it's like a punctuation mark. It's an exclamation mark
Yeah.
to a big time moment. And so it's short. It's short and sweet. It's to the point. So I think in that regard, it works. It's not over the top like some things
Yeah.
can be,
Yeah.
So
That was the source of me asking, because I listen to Kansas City. When I'm doing a lot of traveling, I'm listening on you get the hometown
yeah,
call, right?
yeah,
And that's why. So my thought was, you're saying that, say, hey, we're Indy, and I'm gonna
mhm.
let you know this. You may not know the player, but it's Indy, and that
Yeah,
that was what I was telling Isaiah. I said,
yeah,
that's what I think it is.
yeah, yeah. So like I said, I really wasn't looking for it per se. It just happened. It sort of just hit me, and then I started using it, and I was like a trial balloon. That first year, I was
Yeah.
gonna throw it out and just see if it was going to stick or if it would resonate. And I think most people enjoy it and like it, and that's what it's all about.
Right.
Isaiah talked about just entertaining people. Hopefully something as basic and as simple like that enhances your experience of the game and brings you a little bit more joy if you're a Colts fan listening to the game. And if you hear the Colts score a pivotal touchdown and it's a go-ahead score in the fourth quarter, hopefully, you're pumping your fist and you're like mouthing those words along with me in that big moment. That's really what it's all about. That's what it's intended for.
I like that. I like that. I'd be remiss if I didn't segue over to the great, and I mean great, Bob Lamey. Left us, in 28, going into the 2019 season. So I'm just give you a little bit of history. I was a little kid when he was doing play-by-play for the Pacers.
Yeah.
I remember listening to 1070 and listen to Bob Lamey. And what I noticed the difference when you and Bob, I thought was going to have an aneurysm pulling for the Colts so hard on the radio, right? You have a little bit more Mark Boyle in you, a little bit more balance, right? Nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to know, what did you get from Bob? How's he doing? And he's a pillar of the Indianapolis sports landscape. A lot of people don't know that. And when I was talking to Isaiah about it yesterday, he had no idea that Bob did the Pacers way
Mm-hmm.
back. But he started with the Cougars in the ABA in '73.
Right.
So a little bit of a history buff there. But talk a little bit about what Bob has done for you, how he's doing, and he's definitely deserves a sports landscape statue in the
Mm-hmm.
city of Indianapolis.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up. I mean, it was an absolute pleasure to be working alongside Bob, with Bob, sort of in the trenches within the broadcast, setting it up, and then actually performing the broadcast with Bob, for those 6, 7 years, when I first started in 2012. And I think you sort of hit on it. working with Bob, you sort of understand just how natural everything came to him. I mean, he could. I mean, he could just. Certainly, what I'm about to say is going to sound like he just could wing it, and he never did, but he could. He
Yeah.
absolutely could. He was just
Talent.
just that gifted, and just a wordsmith, and his pacing and his energy. You talked about how big of a homer he was on the broadcast, but that's because like he truly cared. It truly mattered to him if the Colts won or lost, and it matters to me. But it's just stylistically a little bit different, like you said. I mean, and there's nothing. Again, it doesn't make anybody right or wrong. It's just stylistically who people are, and Bob's preparation, his networking, his ability to strike a chord with relationships with players and coaches. That was always the thing that really impressed me the most about Bob, is just how to be around people, and how to grow those relationships, and how that helps him become a better play-by-play guy and understand the game better just through talking to guys in the locker room, or on the team plane or on the bus. Just all these off-the-record conversations that help grow those relationships to be a better voice of the team, if you will. So,
Right.
absolutely, he has his rightful place as a legend within this market, and I think that was one of the things that was internally a little bit hard. Is like, I'm not Bob. When I
Yeah.
first took over, I'm not Bob. I'm never going to be Bob, and I think there's probably an older section of the fan base that still haven't completely bought in, because I'm just not Bob, right? I don't know, maybe there's nothing against me. I don't know. But you know how people, I mean, you do something for 30 plus years. I think to a lot of people, Bob Lamey he represented more of the Colts than Peyton Manning did, because
Absolutely did.
he was just there for every game. He
Yeah.
did 20 games, including the preseason, for 30 plus years, right? So,
Yeah.
um, and that's legendary status for sure. So, that's something that I've had to deal with in terms of just trying to be myself and become more comfortable in my own skin, because it's like holding political office. You're never going to please everybody, but you have to do the best job that you can. You have to do it to your best ability, but you also have to stay true to who you are and how you want to go about doing the job to the best of your ability.
And to that point, and you talked about, you're not Bob, and that's okay to be not Bob, right? So I can still hear the pain in his voice. I want to say it was the 94-95 season, where in Three
Yeah.
River Stadium, Aaron Bailey, the ball goes, I'm screaming touchdown.
Yeah.
So it was my first house I was in. I was about 30 pounds lighter. I jumped up, cracked my head on my ceiling fan light, gas on the top of my head, thinking
Oh my
we just
gosh.
scored a touchdown, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and then as we're in there, screaming and yelling, I'm hearing, because it was the radio, not the television,
Of course.
listening to Bob, and the dejection that he had. Those things resonate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's that tie-in with him. He cares so much that you just you can't mimic that. Right, you can't mimic that. So
Yeah.
that's my memory of Bob in that season. I know you remember that cardiac kids with Harbaugh.
No
That was
doubt.
tough. I know you were younger. You were younger then, but yeah, that was a tough one.
Well, I mean, I'm right there with you, man. I was 10 years old, and that was, I think, for a lot of people, especially in my generation, because the Colts had struggled so much early on in their tenure in Indianapolis. They only, prior to that season that you're talking about right there, that 95 campaign, they only made the playoffs one other time.
Yeah.
Before that in Indianapolis. And so that sort of helped put Indianapolis on the map. And people fell in love with that team and, their journey to the AFC Championship game. And then a couple years later after that, they draft Peyton Manning, and then that basically, that's it as far as history is concerned with the Colts. It turns into a football town along with basketball. But yeah, I was 10 years old, losing my mind in my living room. Same thing. I mean, by the way, how many times did Cordell Stewart step out of bounds in that game? I mean,
Oh man.
the scars are still there, right? I mean, you remember the losses way more than the win. Same thing with, the onside kick in the Super Bowl against the Saints and Hank
Started the
Baskett.
second half.
Yeah, Hank Baskett's face mask. That's what we do. The coulda,
Yeah.
woulda, shoulda stuff, right? The moments that should have been there for the franchise and the city
Yeah.
and everything. So, no, I mean that's just it. You learn so much from Bob in terms of how much you need to put into it, how much it matters to people, right? The seriousness in which this matters to people. It's everybody works really hard, and to the Colt, for the NFL and the Colts, it's entertainment for people. It's an escape. It's a 3 hour. Ability for people to just sort of get lost in something that's bigger than them. And that's what I always take from it. It's a huge responsibility to help people enjoy what they love even more, because it is entertainment, it is sports, but it's a little bit more than that, isn't it? I mean, it's just something that
Yeah.
galvanizes. I mean, we just saw this Pacers run to the NBA Finals in Game 7. How much did that galvanize the city? It helped bring all these people together. And in society, there's just not a lot that does that. I mean, we're so divided politically and religiously, and we're at each other's throats with so much stuff. It just seems like sports is the one big thing that helps bring everybody together. And I like to think that we play a small role in doing that and helping people understand and get more entertainment value out of listening to the game on the radio.
No, definitely, and I would agree with that 100%. And that's funny because talking about those losses and those chances, my third question was going to be those high and low moments, but we already segued into that. So my last one is I want to get your take on how the team is constructed. I know it's early. We're talking mid-July. Summer camp hasn't started. Well, yeah, it starts next week, I think. So as they're constructed, what do you see as their biggest opportunities? And then what do you see as some of their biggest strengths? From a coach perspective, I know there's a lot to be settled, Matt, in the next, 6 weeks. A lot to be settled. Get it. But just want to get from your perspective. I'm sure you've been out there, you're watching, probably mini camps and different things and talking to people. So I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's a good team. It's a good roster. And the core of this roster has been together now for the last couple of seasons. And I think that's probably what makes it most frustrating, is that they've got good players at a lot of key important decisions that help teams win football games, if you get what I'm saying, right? They've got those premium players at those premium positions. And that's a phrase I've said ad nauseum for the last 5 years, because it matters, right? They've got, really good wide receivers. They've got obviously the running back position figured out. They've got defensive ends. They've got defensive tackles. And as it relates to this season, this year, they went bold, and they've brought in some really good players in the secondary, and that's been a problem for them in the past. Is experienced veteran lockdown, shutdown players in the secondary. Charvarius Ward, Cam Bynum in free agency. And then at linebacker, you've got some mainstays like Zaire Franklin, who's coming back, Kenny Moore in the secondary too. So it's just been a little bit frustrating because, like I said, they've missed the playoffs 4 straight years, but in 3 of those 4 seasons, they've won at least 8 games, right? So what is that? Like that's NFL purgatory or the gray area. It's just like no man's land, right? And that's what's frustrating, is that they've had a playoff roster in a lot of key areas, and you look at the 2 big things that kind of let them down last year. If you boiled everything last year down to 2 big things, for me, it was quarterback instability and inconsistencies there, and then defensively not being game specific enough to take away the other team's top weapons and make them play differently than what you knew you had to stop going into the game. I think that was probably the most frustrating thing, is that, last year the Colts played 13 games decided by 1 score, and a lot of those games, if they would have gone the other way, that was a playoff team for sure.
Right.
You're looking back at week 2 against the Packers. You lose that game 16-10. The defense didn't play well at all in that game, but offensively, if you get a little bit better quarterback play in that game, maybe you win it, right? The 2 really important games against the Houston Texans, because they're division games, you lose those 2 games by a combined 5 points. I mean, that's excruciating, right?
Yeah.
But they win, you lose. That concept inside the AFC South, that was a big separator. So the big thing this offseason is boiled down to quarterback competition, bringing in Daniel Jones to help push Anthony Richardson. Daniel Jones has a chip on his shoulder for a different reason. Richardson has a chip on his shoulder trying to prove that he can reach his ceiling or his potential. But the biggest thing is trying to prove that he can stay healthy. And then defensively, new scheme, new defensive coordinator. Lou Anarumo comes in. Like I said, trying to be a little bit more game specific, trying to limit the damage of the other team's top weapons that have routinely given the Colts fits. And that's what's frustrating. You knew going into a game that you had to stop Nico Collins, or you had to stop DeAndre Hopkins, or insert top wide receiver here, and that still it just wasn't happening. So needing to get after the quarterback a little bit more, disrupting the quarterback, not make it so easy for opposing QBs to get into a rhythm and find their groove against that secondary. That's going to be pivotal. So those are 2 big ifs, right? If those 2 big things can happen, then I think this is certainly a team that can contend for the playoffs. And as it relates to the quarterback, the Colts are sticking true to this idea of a true competition, best man win. They don't really care who it is. They just want someone to give the team more consistency at that position and fix some of the passing game problems that they've had the last couple of years. Anthony Richardson trying to improve upon his completion percentage and overall, quarterback acumen and things like that. And then Daniel Jones trying to change the perception of him from his exodus out of New York. So they don't really care who it is. They just prefer somebody, win that job, give them consistency, and give this an offense a better chance to make plays. But third down defense was towards the bottom last year. That was a problem. So there's just 2 big things. Again, offensively, quarterback play in the passing game, and especially the intermediate part of the passing game, and then defensively, getting off the field and not putting so much pressure on the offense, because they lost a lot of games with time of possession. The Colts only won time of possession last year in 6 games. So they were on the field a lot because they couldn't get off on third down and make some plays to turn the tides of games. So that's a long-winded way of saying quarterback, and then overall, maybe this scheme change might be just what the doctor ordered going into a new season.
And my last one. Now, it's great answer, and I appreciate the depth of your answer too, by the way. I'd be remiss, and I wouldn't be the biased person that I am if I didn't ask about Juju Brents. Warren Central graduate, great young man, gave a hell of a lot of effort last year, got hurt, was still wanting to fight. So talk a little bit about Juju Brents, and then that's my last question. And then I'll hand it over to Isaiah.
Well, Juju is such a good kid. He's such a good guy, and your heart breaks for him in terms of what he's had to deal with in his first 2 years in the NFL. I think this is accurate. He's only played in 11 games in his first 2 years. So he's actually had less time on the field than Anthony Richardson. So he's had 3 or 4 different injuries, and he's dealt with a lot of stuff that's out of his control. So it's a huge year for him just to prove that he can stay healthy. And I think, I talked to him in the offseason. We did an interview together about a month or so ago, and he's just chomping at the bit. I mean, first of all, he looks bigger, like stronger. He's put on weight, right, the right kind of weight. But he's just chomping at the bit because it's very fair to say that, his family, those that are close to him, those that are in his inner circle, but Colts fans in general, they have not even come close to seeing the player that he can be, right? Just because he's missed so much time, and it's not just game time; it's practice time. that's big for Anthony Richardson too. It's not just the games, it's the practice, right? Getting the experience, going through, game plan implementation and things like that. So it's a very crowded secondary cornerback room for the Colts. And, what was a little bit of a weakness last year is a big time strength now because you bring in Ward. They brought in free agency Corey Ballantyne, who's a veteran. They draft a kid, Justin Wally, a third round pick, a corner out of Minnesota, who they're really high on. But when they talk about all these additions in the secondary, Chris Ballard, the GM, made sure that he went sort of out of his way to make sure that he mentioned Juju. He said, don't forget about Juju now. We still love this kid. He's had some bad breaks, some raw deals thrown his way in his first 2 years in the NFL, but he can still play. And so it's going to be a fight for him to make this team. But I think if he does, he can have a role. He's certainly going to factor in on special teams. And as you guys know, if you're on the team, you're just a play away. You're a play away from, playing in the middle of the second quarter or making a spot start or supplanting somebody. So you got to be ready to go. You've got to treat like you are the starter, and he's got the right makeup for that. And I think he can play at a really high level. I mean, he's got wingspan. It's incredible how he those long arms, how he can get his hands on the football. We saw that early on in his career in that first year as a rookie. I can think back to that Week 3 game in 2023 against the Ravens. I mean, he had made a nice couple of plays, forced a turnover, recovered a ball. This guy can play, but he's got to prove that he can stay healthy. That's the unfortunate reality of the NFL. It stands for not for long. So if you're not healthy, it's a train that's going pretty fast. It'll pass you by. So it's a big year for him to prove what he can do, but also prove that he can stay healthy and be a big asset for this team, which I think he definitely can be still.
I definitely appreciate that. It's definitely personal. Anything Warren Central is personal. Got to admit that. But we're wishing him the best out here on the far east side. Definitely proud of the east side.
He's a great kid. He's a great young man. He really is. Yeah. He comes from a great family, and you can tell he was raised the right way for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Isaiah, I know you said, man, Daryl's taking up all the time.
No.
But you've had all this time with Matt all these weeks and weeks. I had to steal a little bit.
No, you're all good. I actually wanted to bring up that Saints and Colts Super Bowl. I was in kindergarten, so not to push back the clock, but I was very young. But I remember that onside kick, and I remember watching documentaries about that, specifically about the Saints and then the Colts Super Bowl. So Matt, I guess my first question for you is, when you look back at the years you've been with the Colts and everything else, can you talk about your most memorable game on the call, and then also your biggest heartbreak as well? You guys talked about the game in '95, but since you've been on the broadcast, what is your most memorable game, and what is the game that kind of breaks your heart a little bit?
Oh man, it's a good question. I think for me, probably my favorite moment going into a game was, that 2018 season. Obviously, there was a lot going on that year within the structure of the broadcast, if you will. I was the interim play-by-play guy and was doing it all season. I had a lot on my plate. I was basically doing 2 full-time jobs for 6 months. And so my quality of life really wasn't very good. Plus, I was stressing out about just the future of the position and, what my future held and things like that. And not to get too overly dramatic about things, but that was enough to keep me up at night because, for most people, if you're up for a promotion at work and you don't get the promotion, you'll know about it, and a couple people within the company will know about it. Maybe you'll tell your significant other, and that's probably about it for most people. Like, all due respect, with me. Hundreds of thousands and millions of people would know that if whether or not I got a promotion.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the chance of a lifetime. And that was very tough to balance.
Yes.
So that's sort of the context of what I'm about to say. Was right before that 2018 season, the Colts made the playoffs that year. And right before the playoffs started, we played the Houston Texans in a wild card game in Houston, and it was a Saturday game. So we were going to fly out Friday, so the day before the game. And right before I'm scheduled to leave for the airport and get on the team plane, I get called into a meeting, and I was told that I had landed the job, and I was going to be the permanent, if you will, voice of the Colts. The interim stuff was going away, and so obviously, just
Sigh of relief.
leaping out of my skin internally, trying to keep it all together within the meeting. But basically, had reached the goal that I set out for myself when I was 10 years old, and a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice from myself and others had paid off. So that next day against the Houston Texans, I don't know if it was my best broadcast, but in my mind, it was the most relaxed I had been all year. It was the most I felt like myself. It was the most where I felt like free and liberated and sort of, I took the handcuffs off of trying to internalize every word and not be so hard on myself just because that's what I had been doing leading up to that point. So
Mhm.
I like to feel like that was the most relaxed I had been up until that point. And so like that was always, and plus the Colts beat the holy crap out of the Texans in that game too, right? So that was fun. Like I think all of that kind of coincided with
Yeah.
just like how relaxed and good I felt about that game. So that was really really fun and a good experience. And then not shortly after that, that 2019 season, the night Andrew Luck retired, that was probably the most disappointed I've ever been because it
Yeah.
happened in the middle of the game and it was total chaos and nobody knew what was going on, and you knew what that meant for the franchise too, in terms of the long term. Well, maybe not the long term at the time, but certainly in the short term, you thought, okay, the dynamic of this season has completely changed, right? And maybe the goals and the expectations have changed, which that was kind of a bummer because that team was ready to go.
Yeah.
That team was a good football team, and obviously, things happened there. So, that was disappointing. The 2021 season was incredibly disappointing in Jacksonville. Well, let me go back. The 2021 season, that was the year Carson Wentz is the quarterback and
Yeah.
like a 95, 98% chance of making the playoffs going into the last two games of the season because the Colts, all they had to do was beat either the Raiders, who were under 500, or the Jaguars, who were they were the worst team in the league that year. So they had to win at least one of those games to go to the
Mhm.
playoffs, and they lost obviously both of them. And then weeks 18 against the Jaguars, which is an epic flop and stubbing of the toe, if you will. So that's probably the most disappointed I've been because that you could feel it. You knew some changes were going to happen, and
Yeah.
so it's. But that's professional sports. You still got a job to do. You got to talk about things. You got to put them into perspective. You got to be objective and tell the story, good and bad, and you got to put those feelings and those emotions in check a little bit because you got a job to do and you owe it to the audience to tell them the full story.
And that kind of leads into my next question, right? When a team is doing well, it's probably the easiest job you can have. But when the team isn't doing well, and you see these players every day, and you still have to. I'm not gonna say be negative, but also bring criticism, on the broadcast and not just be, as some people would label it, a homer. How do you balance that stuff out, right? When the team isn't doing well, how do you, not be like super harsh, where it ruins those relationships, but still give, the analysis piece and still doing your job at a professional level.
Yeah, you got to be objective. That's the key
Yeah.
word. You got to tell the story, and I think the Colts do a really good job of trusting us to do that.
Hmm.
I say this all the time, like covering the Colts and working for the Colts at the same time is like an inherent conflict of interest. But they trust us to do a good job to tell the story and to be truthful. As long as you can back everything up factually and you've done your research and you can back it up, uh, then there's nothing they can do. There's nothing to dispute that. In fact, that's your job to tell to give yourself credibility, but also keep people coming back to listen to your content and listen to your product. Because if you're just going to pretend like everything's fine and you're going to purposefully skirt the bad stuff, then I mean, no one's going to take you seriously, right?
Yeah.
But there's a way to do that. I think within that there's a tactful way of doing those things while also, having your check signed by the Colts, if you will. So, you never make it personal.
Mhm.
That's probably the first rule, is never make it personal. Because these are people at the end of the
Yeah.
day, right? So when things aren't going well, it's not like they're trying to miss tackles or miss kicks and blocks and things like that. So it's never personal. You try to stay away from the adjectives. If the Colts are not doing a very good job of stopping the run, let's say, right? The defense they're not able to get off the field and they're getting gashed against the run. Well, instead of saying the Colts are terrible, they're abysmal at stopping the run, or they're the worst tackling team in the league. You know, it's all about context, right? Do your homework. You can frame things differently that gets your point across, that allows people to make their own inferences and come to their own conclusions on just how tough times are as it relates to things. You can do your research and say, in the last 3 games, the Colts rank 31st in rushing yards allowed. Well, most people know there's 32 teams,
Yeah.
right? So they're second to last in this stretch. So that was my way of saying things are not very good without saying that they stink, they suck, right?
Yeah.
So that's a better way to do things, and it also puts it into perspective a little bit more on just how negative some things are as it relates to winning and losing. So, and plus, we have great analysts that put things into perspective. And so you can put the ball in their court, and you can tap into their experience and their analysis on why things aren't going well. You can say, they're out of position, or schematically, here's what's going on, things like that. So it's not just all you have to work with the others around you to better highlight why some things aren't going well. But like I said, I've been with the Colts for over a decade now, and the number of conversations we've had about topics to steer away from is very, very minimal. And so I
Yeah.
give them, and even within that, it's not, you can't talk about these things, but it's just, here's a better way. It's more context for me to understand,
Mhm.
how we kind of got there on some of these things. And so it's some more education for myself, if you will. But they do a great job of letting us do our jobs and tell the story of the season.
Yeah, and I'll jump back into this coming year. With training camp just around the corner, I'm glad we were able to get you before training camp gets going. There's always a position I feel like with teams where teams, feel like at this position, it's not being talked about enough, and that it could surprise some people. When you look at the roster and everything else, is there a position that a lot of people are not talking about that the Colts could be pretty good at, that people may say, they need some areas of improvement there, but you feel that that position may steal the show this year?
That's a good question. You know, what I'm about to say is you're gonna not take it. You're gonna say, well, no kidding, because of who they drafted in the first round. But had they not drafted Tyler Warren at tight end in the first round,
Yeah.
I would have said tight ends.
Hmm.
I thought the tight ends were kind of dragged through the mud a little bit last year because of their lack of production. And I mean, do you need more out of the tight ends? Absolutely. I mean, what that goes without saying. I mean, they had less than 40 catches combined and less than 500 yards receiving combined as a group. But it's not all on them. It goes back to the quarterback inconsistencies. I mean, Anthony Richardson last year started 10 games and completed only 18 passes to tight ends. And most of those passes came outside the numbers. I mean, where do tight ends mostly feast? They feast between the numbers, in the middle of the field, in the intermediate part of the passing game. That's where the Colts struggled the most last year, no matter if it was Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson. So they got to get more out of that area of the offense. But these guys can all play. Again, they were kind of the perception on them, I don't think is very fair. I think they can all play. I mean, obviously, Mo Alley Cox is one of the best blocking tight ends in the game, but he's way more than that. Drew Ogletree is damn good, versatile, athletic tight end. All Will Mallory does is when he's active is catch passes. And all of these guys looked really, really good in the spring. But then you couple that with the addition of Tyler Warren, who I think is just going to be an absolute star. I don't want to put a ceiling on what he can do and a lot of expectations on him, but just based on what you see, the guy can play. I don't think he's going to have a hard time acclimating to the NFL. He's kind of a throwback player. I joked he could thrive in 2025 or he could thrive in 1975. He's just a throwback guy because of all that he can do, and he's pretty versatile. So I think he's going to play a lot and he's going to have a big impact. But I think the tight end group, maybe they only keep 4 guys tops, but I think that group is in store for a much bigger year because of Warren's addition and the threat that he's going to pose to opposing defenses. It's going to open things up for other weapons on offense because of his presence on the field. But I think quarterback-wise, that's a huge emphasis, whether it's Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones, to get tight ends more involved in this offense.
Interesting. And then obviously I think the biggest thing that has been talked about is the quarterback situation, right? With Jones and AR, there was a lot of criticism on AR last year. And then obviously, Daniel Jones, the way he left New York. When you look at both quarterbacks, for fans that may not be sold on either, what can both bring to the table for this Colts team? Obviously, Richardson has the ceiling that he's trying to reach, but I think a lot of people are worried about Daniel Jones when you look at the fan base just based off what he did at New York. What can he bring to the table, and what can AR bring to the table to maybe sell Colts fans a little bit that maybe are a little worried heading into this season with, the quarterbacks and how much, change there's been at that position?
Well, with Daniel Jones, this guy can play. And twice in his career, he's completed at least 67% of his passes. And that's NFL level accurate. And listen, I don't know all the ins and outs of him leaving New York, but I do know that his weaponry here with the Colts is significantly better than anything he ever had with the Giants. Yeah. And watching him starting back in March when he joined the team in free agency, he doesn't look like a guy that's been with the Colts since March. He understands his playbook really well. He's professional as all get out. He's a first in, last guy out type of guy. So he's got the buy-in there. The leadership is there. But he's slinging it all over the place. He's going to the right location with the football. It's accurate. It's on time. He throws a very catchable ball. And the thing that I was most surprised by with Daniel Jones in the offseason is you look at his career numbers and you watch tape, and he's primarily been kind of an intermediate passing guy. In fact, he's never averaged more than 7 yards per attempt in his career. And that's kind of a nerdy analytical stat, but yards per attempt basically tells you how much they push the ball down the field, right? And with Daniel Jones, he was doing that a lot this offseason, which I think is really important to the success and the health of the Colts offense because they've got guys that can take the top off the defense, namely Alec Pierce. Pittman can do that. Josh Downs can do that. And so that's so important to get chunk plays within the progress of an NFL drive. It's hard to score points in this league. It's hard to get points when you're going on 12, 13, 14 play drives. A lot of bad things can happen. So you need those chunk plays to make things a little bit more efficient. But not only do you need to hit them, but you just need to run them so that there's a threat that you can execute those types of plays. So Daniel Jones can do that. And both guys, Richardson and Jones, have the threat of mobility. I think Jones is a very underrated and underutilized athletically quarterback. This guy, he's got the 6th most rushing yards among quarterbacks since he broke in the league in 2019. So he's certainly not as athletic and as dynamic as Anthony Richardson. No one else is, right, in the NFL. But he can still pose the threat of keeping the ball on a read zone or a read option with Jonathan Taylor in the backfield with him. And then obviously with Anthony Richardson, I mean, he's just oozing with talent, right? Oozing with potential that we're still waiting on just because of injuries and the things that have kept him off the field. And then last year you had the benching for a couple of games and some growing up to do as far as that goes. So there's just a lot of unknowns with Anthony Richardson. But the two things that he does really well right now through 2 years in the NFL, he's a great running quarterback, right? He's like an extension of the running game. He's a tailback out there because of how big he is and what he can do with the football. And then he also throws a very good deep ball. And I think that's a big reason why Alec Pierce last year led the NFL in yards per catch at 22.3, because Richardson can put it up and put it in the right spot, and Pierce is going to go get it. But the biggest thing for Richardson that he's got to improve on is accuracy. 47% completion percentage, not getting the middle of the field like we've talked about, taking advantage of enough. That's the biggest thing. So I think this quarterback competition is far from being, from being decided. I think there's going to be some heavy competition once training camp starts. But I think it's also fair to say that based on Richardson missing 7 of the last 9 offseason workouts, that Jones has a little bit of a leg up going into training camp. So, Richardson's going to have a lot of urgency about him. These training camp days are huge for him. And they've used this word nonstop in the offseason, and I've used it too. It's just consistency. The guy that is the most consistent in everything that he does, leading the team in the huddle, leading the team off the field, getting him in the right formations and checks and audibles. But the biggest thing is just consistency in the passing game. The guy that is the most consistent across the board between those two guys is going to win this job.
Interesting.
Nice.
I appreciate that because I think for a lot of people just heading into this year, when it comes to the quarterback, I think a lot of people are a little bit, optimistic about who ends up with the quarterback job. So I am excited to see how training camp goes in that regard. Daryl, we'll do one more question each, and then we'll wrap things up. Matt, if you're good with that. So Daryl, I'll let you give the floor for your last question.
Sure, Matt. Question I was thinking about as you were talking, and you were talking about preparation. So what does what does Sunday look like for Matt Taylor starting at 6 a.m.? Walk us through that. So I want to hear it because preparation is big for me. So I want to hear the Sunday what it looks like for Matt Taylor.
I love it. All right, so let's say we have a 1:00 game, right? It's a home game, so I'll drive to the stadium. Usually get there about 9 and set up all my materials, and I will do one last final drive through, memorizing names and numbers and quizzing myself on where they went to school and the 2 or 3 top bullet points for each guy that makes them relevant for that day. So the first time they catch a pass or make a tackle, boom, it's right there top of mind. I don't have to look down. I just know it when I see it. I can just regurgitate what I've gone through in my mind, 12 different times at points throughout the course of the week. So that one big last final study session, if you will, is what I do when I first get to the stadium. Set everything up, put my notes out where I like them, have my little setup, to have it ready to go. And then I just sort of like chill and try to decompress a little bit. I like to also get there early so that, if there's any fires I need to put out, I can do that too, from a technical standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, if there's any problems going on with our pregame show, which there rarely ever are, but it's just good to be there to, run point on making some phone calls or taking action myself if I need to, if there's anything going awry there. And then it's just, grab a bite to eat, hang out a little bit. Our pregame show starts at noon for a 1:00 game. So you go through the rundown for that one more time, making sure you're hitting everything you need to hit to let the audience know what's most important about the game on the pregame show. Um, and usually, while the pregame show is going on, we have some tape elements during that show that helps us, or helps me in this case. One of the things that I think is the most underrated things that you can do to help prepare for a game, to do play by play, and I do this before the game too. So let me back up. I watch film, and I watch film to maybe get some tendencies and learn some formations and things like that. But really, what I'm watching film for as a play-by-play guy, instead of an analyst, I'm watching to see what guys look like in their uniforms. So that helps me identify them throughout the course of a game, right? We all know what Travis Kelce looks like. We all know what Tyreek Hill looks like. But what is the fourth wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints? What does he look like? How does he wear his uniform? Does he have long hair coming out of the back of his helmet? What kind of cleats does he wear? Does he wear high socks or does he wear low socks? Does he have a skinny build, or is he kind of more muscular and stocky? Like, you're calling the game from 7 stories up. Okay, you're going to miss some stuff. So anything that you can use at your disposal to help identify guys quicker and faster, you do that. And so I watch film during the week with that in mind. But then once the guys get on the field and they're going through their team wide pregame warmups, I'll get my binoculars out and I will look at every single player on the roster, and I will try to quiz myself during the pregame warmup. 31 is this guy, 10 is this guy, 75 is the backup left tackle. The backup quarterback just completed that to the backup running back. And so I will quiz myself on names and numbers as fast as I can with my binoculars during pregame warmups. And it's also, too, a good exercise to go through so that you are looking at those guys that day, right? Maybe that day the top running back's wearing, hey, he has a red towel coming out of the back of his football pants, right? So like if there's any ever a question on who's got the ball, but hey, you see the red towel, that's a good indicator of who's got it if you're ever in doubt. So there's a lot of different ways to understand those things. You've got the jumbotron, you've got your own eyeballs and your own binoculars. I've got a spotter next to me. I've got a sideline reporter who I can hear. She helps spot. But you just go through all of these links to make sure you're getting it right and to be as quickly as possible with the who, the what, and the why, the when, and the where. And so watching pregame warmups is one of the more underrated things you can do because you get a good last minute, you get your last minute eyeballs on what guys look like that day. And you might have an injury, right? The starting right guard might be banged up and you don't know who's going to start that day. Well, if you watch warmups, you know who's being plugged in and plugged into that spot that day. So then once the game starts, you can say during warmups, Jack Johnson is starting at right guard for the New Orleans Saints. So it's just a lot of things like that just like those last minute things and those last minute details get you ready for game all the way up to the kickoff.
So you're telling me you don't get there at 11:45, man, and just get going? Just kidding. I love that, man. That's preparation, and that's why the success you've had as a broadcaster is only going to grow. Because I'm hearing it in your voice, man. You care about this.
Yeah,
you care about this, man.
Yes.
That matters.
I appreciate you saying that because I do. I really do, and I don't take it for granted, man. Like I get really fired up and I get really serious about it because I know how blessed I am to do this. I know what the odds are to have one out of these 32 jobs in the NFL, and I also know what the odds are for me to have this job in the market where I'm from.
Right.
Like on game day, what I was just talking about, like I can drive from my driveway to my seat in the press box at Lucas Oil Stadium. I can drive, I can park, I can go up the elevator. That whole process takes me about 20 minutes. Like, are you kidding me? Like how lucky am I to be able to do this? How many people would love to have my job and take this from me? And so, yeah, you bet your ass, I take it serious. And
I love it.
the NFL stands for not for long, and that deals with people just like me. They can take this job away from me at any time. And if they do, I'll have no regrets because I will have busted my ass and worked really hard at it.
I love it, man. I appreciate it, man. You've been great for me. I definitely appreciate it. I know Isaiah's got a question or two steps, but definitely appreciate the honesty as well, too.
No, my so my last question was just, and it comes back to kind of not only me but maybe the people that are a bit younger. When you For younger broadcasters that may not have get as much experience, I was lucky to have 3 years at Warren Central, and then I'll be in my 4 years here at IUE's. For people that are just looking to get in the door, that are a bit younger, what would you recommend to them, and what's your biggest advice to people that are broadcasting in college, high school, or just trying to find a way to get into the business as well? Because I know so many people that will, they go to the school, but it doesn't have radio and it doesn't have TV, and they
Right.
don't really have an outlet to get into stuff like that. So, what would you say to those people, and then the people already broadcasting in high school and college as well?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I'm like a dinosaur compared to kids now because I studied traditional radio and traditional TV. I didn't go to college with YouTube and cell phones and this ability right now to do what we're doing. Tape a podcast on Zoom and go live and stream and all of these things. So
Yeah,
in that regard, I'm learning just like a lot of people. But I will say what people have now, like if I was 22 years old now in college, compared to when I was in school, um, that when I was in school, you had the campus radio station, and you could call the games on that. Depending on what size school you went to,
yeah,
you might have to kind of wait in line. You might have to be an upperclassman to kind of get down and dirty, if you will, and get a lot of experience. The great thing about the age in which we live in now is that you don't need to do that, or you don't have to do that. Um, what I would say is if you're going to school and you don't have as many opportunities as you want to do the school properties and be part of the school athletic teams, the great thing is you can walk down the street to the local high school and say, hey, is anybody calling your games? Is anybody broadcasting your games? Do you guys have live stream for your games? If not, let me do them. Right, create your own opportunities there.
yeah.
There's I went to Franklin College, a little small school, liberal arts, Division III school. Played football there, but got a great education studying traditional mediums at the time. And now I know within the town itself of Franklin, there's a commercial radio station that's very much we woven into the fabric of the community. They're doing local sports. They're doing local festivals and things like that. Like if it were me at the time and I still went to Franklin, I'm 22 years old, I would have just walked in and said, "Put me to work. You don't even need to pay me. What
Yeah,
what what can I do? How can I help? Right? Let me call these local games that you want to do. And if you already got somebody to do them, let's do more of them. So create your own opportunities there. That's the biggest thing is because nowadays it doesn't matter how crude or lack of professional it looks. Just do it. Learn from your mistakes.
yeah,
Cut your teeth. And treat everything like you're doing like it's the Super Bowl because it's your Super Bowl. It matters to you. And I used to do high school sports and college sports, and the same way that I'm prepping for these games with the Colts, that's the same way I prep for those games because it mattered. It mattered to me because you never know who's listening, and you never know who's going to be able to be in a position to give you a better opportunity to do something bigger and better. So that's the biggest piece of advice that I give is try to create your own opportunities, um, and never say no to anything because you never know what something could lead to something else, how that could just snowball and you could uh, you know work your way up the ladder. That's sort of my story is just networking, trying to meet as many people as possible, trying to build relationships, and you know being known as the guy that'll work hard, not say no to anything that I think is beneath me. Show some trust, show some loyalty, hard work, dedication, and then when something does open up, make sure that those that are in those decisions to or those that are in position to make those decisions, make sure that they have no reason to not consider you, and to have there be no reason to not give you those opportunities that are bigger and better based on the work that you put in to show your dedication to what you want to accomplish.
Awesome, Matt. I do appreciate it. You've been a mentor of mine for about a year and a half now, so I do appreciate you coming on to the podcast, and can't wait to listen to you this season on the Colts radio, in the car, wherever else. There's also the app, right, for 1070, or where is there an app they can listen to as well?
They can listen on the Colts app. Yeah.
Colts app. Okay,
Colts
I didn't
app.
know if it was 1070 or where it
Yeah.
was at. So
Sure.
Okay, so make sure you guys do check out the Colts this season. Matt, once again, thank you for joining us. But folks, that's going to do it for this episode right here on the Game Time Podcast.